come on.
Because he says, "You're nobody, but not to me." And that was a good line. You know, I felt that, and there were various lines in the film that I felt like that. Even the death of Snoke, you know, I loved that because I hated Snoke. I thought it was a crap name. He seemed like a crap character. He seemed like he was from Lord of the Rings. So I loved the fact that he just killed off Snoke and kind of shocked everybody. I heard some criticisms that Snoke is just dressed in like gold. I really felt like this was Rian Johnson again bringing back the original theme of Star Wars. This is not about making money. This is about humanity and a deeper meaning.
Hey, I knew that was more to you than money.
So I feel like he put Snoke in gold for the same reason that he has the casino planet, and it's like, where does the true evil lie? It's people who are just trying to do things for their own gain. So that little subquest with Finn and Rose, again, it's been criticized. I don't understand why. Number one, the themes of it are great. I was shocked to see it in a modern Star Wars film. The last episode 7 felt to me like it was just a big project to make a lot of money. This one felt like the opposite, and it really felt like Rian Johnson was kind of saying he's got issues almost with Hollywood, with people who literally are just there to try and make money. And obviously he's got problems with war. He's putting in a bit of a metaphor about who really makes money from war and how terrible it is and how awful that is, and he put that into this movie, which I thought was great. It is called Star Wars, and he's saying, you know, life shouldn't be about making money and having a good life off the backs of other people. It should be about trying to be good and trying to do good. Now, that thing I said earlier, not everyone in the movie is, or there's no bad characters in the film. Even characters like Poe, who's going up against the purple-haired woman who is his boss. There's a lot of that in this film. There's a lot of young people going up against those who are above them, telling them not to do things. Those young kids at the end of the film, you know, the ones who Rose finds on the casino planet, they basically have to face adversity. And then, like I said, Poe Dameron is going up against authority. But the point is no one's doing the wrong thing. Like, Finn does what he thinks is best, right? Where he goes on this long journey to shut down the ship's tracking beacon thing so that they can get away. He does all of this because he believes it's the right thing. And ultimately, it doesn't really lead to much. He does end up facing off against Phasma, so it leads to something, but the plan doesn't work the way he wanted it to work. But it doesn't matter because he was trying to do the right thing. Poe is trying to do the right thing by holding kind of a coup and a rebellion, and ultimately he's not doing the right thing, but he's trying to do the right thing. And his superior, she thinks she's doing the right thing, and she isn't necessarily doing the right thing. It doesn't work out, and she ends up having to sacrifice herself at light speed. But again, it asks these bigger questions, which is, look, just because you want to do the right thing doesn't mean you're actually doing the right thing. You might be doing the wrong thing. You might actually be bad, even though you want to be good. And I thought that was terrific to have that much depth in this. It's the most depth I've seen in Star Wars since The Empire Strikes Back. It asks big questions, and then Benicio del Toro's character just encompassed all of that with the guy who's like, look, everything's messed up. Everyone thinks they're doing the right thing. You know, I'm not getting involved in it. I'm just going to live my own life. And who's to say that he's wrong? I really like that. Like, at no point do they ever say he is a bad guy. You know, even he says, maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm not. And I think it's terrific that it actually asks these questions. Also, in regards to legitimate depth in the movie, Luke's kind of big grand finale, now he goes down to this salt planet that looks incredible, and it's very 80s because you've got these ships that these characters are flying across this red salt desert, and it's like everything's kind of junky and falling apart in Millennium Falcon fashion. This was a tremendous sequence. Even the fact that the Millennium Falcon makes an appearance with actual Star Wars music. I mean, I was like, thank God he put John Williams' music from the original trilogy in this film, and I complained about episode 7. How can you have one of the most famous soundtracks of all time and not put it in the movie? It's ridiculous. Well, he did put it in this. He put it in this scene, and it was fantastic. Also, you'll notice Rey was not flying the Millennium Falcon. Another big criticism of 7. How did she learn how to fly that thing? It's just stupid. It was no script. But in this, she's on the gunner and Chewie is flying the Millennium Falcon. Again, he sorted out that problem. And this is obviously the same scene where Rose says, we're not going to win this by fighting what we hate, but saving what we love. And that, again, is his approach to Star Wars. I'm sure of it. But anyway, those ships, you know, Poe puts his foot through the gas and his foot comes out the other side of it. Everything in 80s movies, stuff was falling apart, busted up, like the Millennium Falcon. You know, Han's having to like hit it to try and make it start working. This was really cool. This is, again, bringing it back to what it's supposed to be. None of this ridiculously shiny, perfect designs like in the original prequel trilogy. Making everything a bit bust up and crude and a bit almost human, let's say. And then in this incredible sequence, Luke shows up and he has a standoff with Kylo, which was great. I mean, it looked incredible. The whole thing looked incredible. Plenty of bang for your buck because the movie just kept on going on. And he had a nice scene with Leia and all that kind of stuff. But the questions people are asking now is, why couldn't Luke actually be there? Why did it turn out to be a projection of himself, a hologram almost? And I felt like that was quite beautiful for two reasons. Number one, because there is power in cinema. I mean, writer-directors commonly are putting themselves into their stories and their writing and their own films. And Rian Johnson knows, obviously, look, Star Wars isn't real, but it's powerful. Films are not real. They are myth, they are legend, they come out of people's heads, they are ideas, they are concepts, but they touch you in a very real way. You sit in a cinema and you are touched by something that is a beam of light coming out of a projector, and that is essentially what Luke's doing, is look, I can save all of you, but I don't even have to be real. And I feel like that's the power of cinema, and Rian Johnson obviously loves cinema, and I felt like that's one aspect of why that scene actually worked very well for me, is he doesn't have to be there, you know. It's like, if anybody is still listening or watching this review, you know, I'm not really there right now with you. I've said this in the past and you're listening to it now in the present, but you can still be touched by it. It can still affect you, hopefully. And that's what he's done with Luke, is look, I'm making a movie, you know, Rian Johnson, I'm making this film, and hopefully it's going to touch you, because that is the power of the mind. That is the gift of trying to do something good. You don't actually have to physically be there in order to do it. So that's one thing I liked. The other thing I liked is that Luke is essentially a legend, and this is thrown around in the film that Luke Skywalker, the legend, this was said in The Force Awakens, and then in this film Finn is considered to be a legend by Rose. I'll mention again that scene with Rose's sister. I thought that was amazing at the beginning of the film, the action scene where all the bombs fall out of that aircraft. It looked amazing. It was very, very kind of anime almost, but it was just meticulously beautiful, the way those bombs drop out of that shaft and everything gets blown to hell. And the movie was violent as well. I mean, Jesus, some of the stuff was like really violent in a really good way. But anyway, going back to Luke's kind of hologram scene, Luke is considered a legend, and he's on his island kind of carrying the weight of the world, because ultimately he's fallible, he's imperfect, just like everybody. And you may want to be perfect, but perfection is only an illusion. If you were to look at your own heroes, all of these people are fallible. We all have faults. They all have faults. No matter if it's a Nikola Tesla or a Gandhi or your favorite writers like a Stephen King or even a film director like George Lucas, these people are flawed because they are human. And I like the idea that Luke says, look, a real me cannot go up against these people with a laser sword and win. But my legend, that who people believe me to be, can go up against these people and win. Because that's all artists ever really create, is a kind of an illusion of the self, whether it's through writing a book or being an actor in a film or making a film or writing a song, and you put out a version of yourself into the world through your art. And that is essentially what becomes legend. The real person is somebody who has to deal with growing up, growing old, worrying about little things like, I've got a toothache, maybe it's going to have to come out, I feel a little bit ill, I hope there's nothing wrong with me, oh my god, they have kids and they worry about their children, am I a good parent? These are the kinds of problems people face in everyday life. But if you're famous or you create something famous, the work that you create gets to become this kind of deity, this beacon of light, and the promise of something beautiful and perennial and eternal, and it's not real, but you can believe in it. And so I felt like that is literally what the representation of Luke was. It was exactly that. It's a representation of something perfect, because the real thing can never really be perfect. So the scene had a lot of depth for me, and then ultimately to see Luke on his rock, back on his little home island, fade away was also very beautiful. I mean, I appreciate the argument that, did he really have to end here? Did we have to lose Luke in this film? Well, two reasons that I thought were okay. Number one is his last line is, "See you around, kid." So he will be back, and if he comes back as kind of another blue hologram, it doesn't mean he won't be powerful. Let's not forget that in this film, Yoda gets lightning out of the sky to burn all of the Jedi books, so he still has influence over reality, right? So Luke can too, if Abrams wants to write him into the next film. The other thing is, Rian Johnson, I figure, was faced with a few difficulties. One being, what if something happens to Mark Hamill, right? They lost Carrie Fisher, so they're like, well, what if something happens to Mark Hamill and in real life, we lose him? Then that character will have never had an end. So at least he's given him an end in worst case scenario, so that the Luke story is successfully finished instead of just something that never ends. And if we want to bring him back, we can. But at least his story got a good ending. And for me, it is the perfect ending, because the Jedi Knight story is always compared with religious stories. And if you go and look at biblical tales, now I'm not really a religious person, but I'm interested in this as I'm interested in many things. But there are various characters even in the Bible where it's literally described as they worked and they reached a certain plateau when it came to their own personal work and path in life, and then they ascended, is how it's described. They got so high in terms of what God wanted them to do, that they just reached a point where they ascended. People have even said this about, like, Bruce Lee. Bruce Lee used to say, there is no end, there is no highest level. You just get better and better and better and better with your spirituality and your understanding of reality. And he's a person where it's often argued, like, did he just get so good that he just one day ascended? Because doctors could not understand why Bruce Lee so suddenly died. He took like a couple of aspirin one day and then he died. And yet, interestingly, Bruce Lee walked around for about 2 weeks before he died telling everyone he was going to die. He told his own mother he was going to die. And he told his doctors, and the doctors said, you're the healthiest man in the world. And yet 2 weeks later, he died on a couch, and to this day no one can quite understand it. Now, I know I'm getting a little bit fantastical. Again, if we're going to get biblical, look at the story of Jesus Christ, which is, he says, it is finished, and then he dies. The idea being, he had a purpose on earth, and when he reached the end of his purpose, he did everything he was supposed to do. He says, it is finished. My mission is complete. And that's kind of the way I felt like Rian Johnson wrote the Luke character. It is finished. I did what I was supposed to do. And he has that very beautiful shot where he fades away and you got the two suns in the distance, direct throwback to the first film, and it looks beautiful, unlike the final shot of episode 3 with the two suns, which looks like total dog shit. Awful sequence that was. But in this, it looks wonderful. And then you get the wide shot of the kind of cape blowing away on the wind, which again looks amazing in a very almost anime way, but I would say this whole film is arguably the most aesthetically beautiful of any Star Wars film ever made, with Empire being its strong competition. I'd have to compare them side by side, but this is certainly visually remarkable no matter what. Just another little thing, I'll say that I love the fact that Ryan put characters on Luke's island. A huge criticism that I had of The Force Awakens is that it just looked like Earth. The whole film looked like Earth, and I couldn't understand why that ever was allowed to happen. So I love the fact that Ryan put little interesting, fun, quirky characters on this island, and that for me was kind of his success of the whole movie. Is I'm going to have the depth, I'm going to have the questions, I'm going to bring back the mystery of what is the Force, and I'm going to bring back the idea that anybody can have the Force and anybody can believe in it and become a Jedi, but I'm also going to put in the fun and the interesting weird little characters that make you laugh, and I'm going to have some laughs, and I liked it. Was it perfect? No. Was the script perfect? No. But did it feel like Star Wars? Yes. Did I feel the heart of the director, the passion of the director? Yes. I really felt that, and I also felt like the director Rian Johnson is a good person. You know, he put in so many messages that were anti-money like the original, and anti-power, and the difficulties of being human. It was all in there. And then ultimately the final shot of the film goes back to what I consider to be the whole kind of hook in regards to what Ryan's trying to say, which is that you've got these little kids playing with Star Wars toys, right? Playing with a Luke Skywalker toy, and it's the little kid who's got this boss telling him what to do, and then the kid goes out with his broomstick and grabs it in almost a Jedi fashion, and he looks up at the stars, and he's holding that broom almost like it's a toy lightsaber. And I was like, yes, that's what Star Wars is. Star Wars was something that came out in the 70s, and little kids were at school, and their teachers and their parents were telling them what to do, and these little kids were playing with Star Wars figures, and they couldn't afford a lightsaber toy, but they'd grab anything they could, be it a broomstick or a rolled up newspaper, and for however long they wanted, that was their lightsaber. They believed they were Jedi Knights. They looked up at the stars and they believed in Star Wars. They believed in this whole mythology. And it was this idea that if you believe, you can become it. You can become better. It's not like you will literally become a Jedi Knight, but you can become something that you want to become. That's the whole power of the Star Wars saga, and that's what obviously worked for Rian Johnson, who as a kid would have looked up and thought, I want to be a film director. And look at him. He made a small film, Brick, and he hung on to it for years and didn't even show it to anyone, kept it in his bedroom, and now here he is directing Star Wars. And he believes that one of the cores of the original films is the idea that anybody can tap into this greater force. It's not a metachlorian bollocks, it's a force that everybody has access to. So he ends the movie with a little kid playing with toys, looking up at the stars, holding a broomstick. The shadow almost looks like he's holding a lightsaber, and he believes. So that's my review. I'm not saying it's the best movie ever made, but it's definitely for me the best Star Wars since Return of the Jedi. So that's my review. I hope you liked my review and I hope you're all well. Peace, be well, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and may the Force be with you always.